So this is just a follow-up to the proof that the patriarchy does not exist. So we've got this woman, Ashley Risen, who has raped a young boy, and the thing is, it's statutory rape. So when I say she's raped him, it's without question that she has done so. And it turns out on 8 occasions. So she's a serial rapist. Now she also plied the boy with alcohol, and that she's an adult, he's a child. So I'll just reiterate what was said in the first video about this, and I'll just read a couple of paragraphs here. So a former high school teacher's assistant and softball coach has pleaded guilty to charges related to a sexual relationship with a student she reportedly begged the student not to tell authorities about. So she's coerced the boy into sexual assault, and then she knows what she's doing is wrong. And then she has, she says she asked the boy not to tell authorities, but she could well have threatened him. We don't know the full details of the whole thing. So she knew what she was doing was wrong, and she has tried to cover her tracks, so to speak. So there's actually a charge that she was brought against her regarding that, and I think she has actually been convicted of it. I just want to read another paragraph here, and it's, prosecutors say that Risen is not being charged with rape by force, and it is believed that she engaged in criminal activity with only one victim. So the implication there is that the victim was a willing participant in the crime. The way it's worded, rape by force, if it was actually a charge, it would be aggravated sexual assault would be the actual charge. So I'm just going to add here that this idea that the victim could be a willing participant is negated by the fact that she's a 31-year-old adult, and he's a child, he's a minor. So there can't be willing participation. It's assumed in cases like this, with a male perpetrator or female victim scenario, it's assumed that the female has no ability to withstand the advances of the sexual predator, and yet this idea that she's not being charged with rape by force implies that there was no force used against the victim, but there's the adult against the power dynamic there, and there's also the female ability to manipulate a young boy. I mean, the young man in this instance was without defence, and that is just to do with the age difference, the age dynamic, and the maturity levels alone indicate that young man had no defence whatsoever. So it's a heinous crime, without a doubt. So she's not being charged with that. But the implication there is the victim was a willing participant, which you can imagine swapping the genders, and Now here's one thing that I'll probably get into trouble for saying, and that is women or girls mature faster than boys. So when you say that a boy is a willing victim of a crime like this, it's not the same as saying that a young or the same aged girl would be, if you know what I mean. Like, a boy tends not to lose his virginity at the same age as a girl. That's been my experience. I think I'm a pretty general sort of, I had a normal childhood, I think, and as a 14, 15-year-old, I wasn't engaged in sexual activity, whereas from personal experience talking to girls 14 and 15 years old, they tend to lose their virginity around that age. So like I say, the news story is that she's had a sexual relationship with a student. So coming to the sentencing side of it, she's gone to court now, and she has been sentenced for her crimes. So I'll just read out the story. A Hamilton woman and I'll read the headline first, and that is former New Miami softball coach charged for sex involving student going to jail. So that's the headline. So you think justice has been served. So a Hamilton woman and former New Miami coach was sentenced Tuesday to time behind bars for engaging in sexual conduct with a teen student while she was a coach. Ashley Rane Risen, 31, was indicted in January on 8 counts of sexual battery and tampering with evidence. That's her pleading with the boy not to go to the authorities. All felonies, and 1 count of furnishing alcohol to a minor, a misdemeanor. So that was what she was indicted with. At an October hearing in Butler County Common Pleas Court, so she's given the opportunity to plea bargain, Risen pleaded guilty to sexual battery, a 3rd-degree felony, and 2 counts of gross sexual imposition, both 4th-degree felonies. In exchange for the plea, the remainder of the charges were dismissed. So she engaged 8 times. She had 8 encounters with this young boy, and she's managed to dismiss 7 of them, and 2 counts of gross sexual imposition. So I'm not sure what that relates to, but she's got the alcohol, so the coercion side of it, and anything that would paint her as a sexual predator has been dropped, basically. So on Tuesday, Judge Dan Hawley sentenced Risen to 90 days in jail, to be followed by an up to 6 months at River City Correctional Centre in Cincinnati, which is a treatment-based lockdown facility. So she's in the county lockup. She's been charged with felonies, which is a state or federal crime. So she's in the local county jail for 90 days. She probably knows the deputies or whoever's locking her up, because she's from a small town, I think. And then up to 6 months at a correctional facility. When released, Risen will be on a 5 years probation and required to undergo aftercare drug and alcohol monitoring. So she's basically, that's nothing. Risen was also designated a Tier 3 offender, a sex offender, requiring her to register her residence every 90 days for life. So 4 phone calls a year for the rest of her life. Hawley stayed Rison's sentence until November 21st, when she's to report to the Butler County Jail. She has been free on bond and is fitted with a GPS monitor. Rison faced the maximum of 8 years in prison. So she could have gone away to a penitentiary for 8 years for her crimes, and it's been allowed to be plea bargained down to 90 days. 30 days off for good behaviour, and then into rehab for up to 6 months, but she could be out in 2 or 3, who knows. So she's raped the child multiple times, and she's got a slap on the wrist, which is what I predicted. So here's almost exactly mirror image case. Oakville softball coach 41 charged in child sexual assault investigation. That's the headline. So guess what the genders are? A 41-year-old Oakville man has been charged in connection with a Hamilton Regional Police Service Child and Sexual Assault Unit investigation. Ooh, sounds dangerous. He was arrested by Halton Police on January 22nd and charged with invitation to sexual touching and indecent exposure to a person under 16. The charges have not been proven in court. Police say the alleged victim is a girl under 16. Then they out his online profiles, so suspect is alleged to have online profiles on Kik and Snapchat, and they tell the usernames, which I'm not going to repeat. He has ties to the Oakville Girls Softball Association, where he has served as a coach and a manager. The investigation is ongoing, and anyone with information is asked to call numbers, etc. So this is a guy who sounds like he's just flopped his dick out and got the girl oh, it's an invitation to sexual touching, so maybe she didn't even touch anything. Who knows? So she's under 16, so it's not rape, it's not sexual assault or anything like that, but it's the headline: Oakville softball coach 41 charged in child sexual assault investigation. Right, so it's not, she hasn't, I mean, it's got to be at the low end of any kind of sexual impropriety. It's certainly not statutory rape, but it's made out to be. So this is my contention here, is that if we lived in a patriarchy, those two headlines, or the gist of the headlines, would be the reverse, right? So the woman assaulting the male child would be, the headline would be designed to instill outrage in the community. Right, that would be what it would, like if we were actually living in a patriarchy and a woman had assaulted a male child, then the patriarchy would want to instill outrage in society in general. In the same, and think of this as a black slave assaults a white female child. You know, that guy's doomed to a fate worse than death, you know. And that's where, like, slavery is an example of an oppressive society controlling the slaves, you know. And so when one does what shouldn't happen in that context, then outrage and lynching and all the rest of it. So in a patriarchy, a so-called patriarchy, we have a 41-year-old softball coach and the word sexual assault in the headline, and then he hasn't sexually assaulted the child at all. It's been indecent exposure and an invitation. So the headline doesn't actually have any connection really with the story, whereas the other headline was Ohio softball coach pleads guilty after sleeping with student, begged them not to tell, and a former teacher's assistant and softball coach has pleaded guilty to charges related to a sexual relationship with a student, is the sub-headline. So I suggest that this idea that we're living in a patriarchy is absolutely asinine, because if we were, the female softball coach would be facing hard time for the rest of her life, or be on death row for having the temerity to interfere with a member of the patriarchy. And it's exactly the opposite as to what you would expect if patriarchy was real. So that's my contention, that this idea that there's a patriarchy at all, in any way or shape or form, is a fiction of a warped feminist brain. With that said, I'll leave you to have a think about it.